What if the most terrifying stories you've ever heard weren't fiction, but recorded history? Deep in the misty hills of Appalachia, beauty hides brutal truths, deadly mining disasters, violent moonshine feuds, unsolved family murders, and eerie superstitions. No legends here, just chilling facts that prove Appalachia's darkest secrets are hauntingly real. Would you like a few alternate options with different tones? Mysterious, dramatic, or urgent? Imagine clocking in before sunrise, descending deep into the earth with nothing but a helmet and hope, and never coming back up. That's exactly what happened on December 6, 1907, in Monongah, West Virginia. It was a cold winter morning when two connected coal mines suddenly exploded. In just seconds, 362 men and boys, mostly immigrants from Italy, Hungary, and Poland, were buried alive. The cause? A lethal mix of methane gas and coal dust, a cocktail just waiting for a spark. Some blamed a malfunctioning safety lamp, others pointed to a mishandled mining cart. Either way, rescue efforts were slow, disorganized, and in some cases non-existent. Bodies were found days later, some clutching pickaxes, others simply vanished. The Monongah explosion is still the deadliest mining disaster in American history. But the tragedy didn't end there. It forced the government to open its eyes. The U.S. Bureau of Mines was created in 1910 to monitor safety, but change came painfully slowly. Now fast forward almost a century to Key Creek, Pennsylvania, 2002. 9 coal miners were suddenly trapped 240 feet underground when a wrong drill released millions of gallons of water into their shaft. For 3 straight days, the world watched as rescuers raced to drill a narrow escape shaft. With freezing water up to their necks and oxygen running out, the miners clung to hope and each other. Incredibly, all 9 survived. It was a miracle, sure, but it was also a wake-up call. Despite over 100 years of regulation, how many more mines are ticking time bombs, just waiting to explode or flood? Federal reforms and NIOSH standards have helped, but many older abandoned mines across Appalachia still pose deadly risks, silent reminders that beneath the beauty of the hills, danger still breathes. Long before meth labs and cartel headlines, Appalachia had its own underground empire, built not on drugs, but on corn liquor. When Prohibition slammed into America in 1920, making alcohol illegal nationwide, Appalachia barely flinched. In fact, the mountains came alive with the sound of stills firing up. The region's rugged, remote terrain was perfect for hiding distilleries. You couldn't hear a still bubbling on a hollowed ridge. And if revenuers came sniffing around? The narrow backroads, high ridges, and fiercely loyal locals made sure outsiders rarely left unscathed. One such clash unfolded in Middlesboro, Kentucky in 1921, a town already simmering with tension between bootleggers and lawmen. When federal agents raided a suspected moonshine den, they were met with gunfire, not compliance. The streets erupted into chaos. 2 agents were killed, several locals were wounded, and the rest fled, leaving blood in the snow. Then came the Knox County shootout of 1926. Word got out that a local sheriff was turning a blind eye to certain distillers. Rival factions, some loyal to law, some to liquor, took up arms. When the dust settled, 6 lay dead, including a deputy and 2 bootleggers. The war wasn't just over whiskey, it was about power, pride, and survival. The government launched Operation Lawless in the 1930s to break Appalachia's bootlegging backbone. Dozens were arrested. Still, sites were torched. But moonshine didn't die. It adapted. When Prohibition ended, the illegal stills kept running. The taxes were too high, the profits too sweet, and the demand always there. Even today, moonshining hasn't disappeared. It's just gone deeper underground or rebranded. Craft distilleries now market legal moonshine in sleek glass bottles. But in some mountain hollers, you'll still find jars with no labels passed around like secrets. So here's the question: how do you kill a culture that was never meant to be seen? You don't. You chase it, raid it, and regulate it. But in Appalachia, where independence runs deeper than blood, some traditions refuse to die, especially the ones you can drink. Not every ghost story in Appalachia is fiction. Some are tucked inside sheriff's files, witness statements, and yellowed newspaper clippings, stories too bizarre to dismiss, too cold to solve. Take the Bell Witch case, for example. In the early 1800s, the Bell family of Adams, Tennessee, became the center of one of America's most famous poltergeist cases. It started small, tapping on walls, whispered voices no one could trace. But things escalated fast. The entity spoke, identified itself as Kate, and began tormenting John Bell relentlessly. Neighbors heard it scream at night. Slaves reported seeing shadowy figures. John's health spiraled, with mysterious seizures, swelling, and eventually death. At his funeral, the voice reportedly laughed from the rafters. There were dozens of witnesses, churchgoers, relatives, even skeptics, all confirming the same chilling events. Now fast forward to October 1961, in rural Kentucky. Marie Rogers, a 19-year-old girl, vanished after visiting a county fair. She was supposed to meet friends, but she never did. Her body was discovered days later, partially submerged near a creek. There were bruises, but no definitive cause of death. No weapon, no suspect. Her boyfriend was questioned but released. Then the trail went cold and stayed that way for over 60 years. And then there are cases that look like horror movies on paper, but they're real. Think of the Villisca axe murders of 1912 in Iowa, where an entire family, including 4 children, was found bludgeoned to death in their sleep. The killer? Never caught. Appalachia has had its own eerily similar cases. Whole families murdered in remote cabins, doors locked from the inside, neighbors reporting no screams, no sounds. In one 1924 Virginia case, the bodies of a couple and their 2 children were found neatly arranged in bed. The killer made coffee before fleeing. The axe left on the porch. So what kind of evil slips through the cracks when the law can't keep up and the land keeps secrets? These aren't bedtime tales, these are documented, unsolved, and terrifyingly plausible. In the dark corners of Appalachia, where towns are miles apart and roads are barely paved, it's not the ghosts you fear most, it's the silence after. In Appalachia, the land can be just as dangerous as the people who dig into it. February 26, 1972, Buffalo Creek, West Virginia. It had rained for days, but no one expected what happened next. At 8 a.m., a makeshift coal slurry dam, owned by Pittston Coal Company, collapsed, unleashing a 30-foot wall of black water through 16 coal towns. Homes were ripped from their foundations, cars floated like toys. In minutes, 125 people were dead, over 1,000 injured, and 4,000 left homeless. The company called it an act of God. Survivors called it corporate murder. Investigators found that the dam, built with coal waste and minimal engineering, had been flagged as dangerous 3 times before it failed. Still, it stood, until it didn't. The survivors eventually filed a class action lawsuit and won a settlement, but no one went to jail. Just when Appalachia thought it had learned its lesson, it happened again. In October 2000, in Martin County, Kentucky, a coal slurry impoundment failed, spilling 306 million gallons of sludge, 30 times bigger than the Exxon Valdez oil spill. Toxic black sludge choked 70 miles of streams, killed aquatic life, and contaminated drinking water for thousands. Locals woke to find creeks turned into sticky black rivers of death. The EPA called it one of the worst environmental disasters ever in the Southeast. But the story barely made national news. Why? Because it was Appalachia. And Appalachia, to many, is still out of sight, out of mind. So here's the question. What happens when you live in a place where your life and your land are worth less than what's under it? The geography here is unforgiving. Steep hills, narrow valleys, and loose soil. But it's not nature that's the villain. It's decades of industry neglect, poor regulation, and profit-first thinking. Hundreds of abandoned impoundments still dot the region, many unmonitored, many leaking quietly. In Appalachia, disaster doesn't always roar. Sometimes it seeps, spills, or sits quietly until the day it decides not to. Some dangers in Appalachia don't explode or flood. They settle in slowly, into lungs, into bloodstreams, into entire generations. Start with black lung disease, pneumoconiosis, the price of breathing underground. For more than a century, coal miners worked with no masks, no filters, just raw exposure to coal dust. And it shows. Since 1968, over 76,000 coal miners have died from black lung in the US, the vast majority from Appalachia. The disease scars the lungs until breathing feels like drowning in dry air. By the time symptoms show up, it's already too late. A federal compensation program was created in 1969, but qualifying is often a bureaucratic nightmare. Miners spend their final years fighting the system that profited from their suffering. But just as black lung dug into the old, a new crisis quietly swallowed the young. In the 1990s, pharmaceutical giants Purdue Pharma, McKesson, and Johnson & Johnson flooded Appalachia with painkillers like OxyContin. Doctors, many under pressure or misinformation, prescribed them like candy. One report showed that in just 2 years, over 20 million pain pills were shipped to a single West Virginia town of 3,000 people. By 2017, places like Pike County, Kentucky, were seeing 52 overdose deaths per 100,000 residents, more than double the national average. Whole communities collapsed. Parents buried children, and children were raised by grandparents or in foster care. Lawsuits followed. Purdue Pharma was hit with billions in damages, and executives testified before Congress. But the damage was already done. So, how do you heal a region where both breath and relief have been weaponized? Hospitals are scarce, doctors are even scarcer, but communities didn't wait. Grassroots movements like Recovery Kentucky, Appalachian Harm Reduction, and church-run clinics sprang up. They're offering detox beds, needle exchanges, Narcan training, and more, not from profit but from pain. Appalachia isn't just fighting disease, it's fighting the systems that delivered it. In these hills, healing isn't handed down, it's carved out. One breath, one step, one life at a time. For generations, the Appalachian economy ran on two things: coal and timber. And for a while, it worked. The hills were alive with the buzz of chainsaws, the thunder of dynamite, and the clank of coal cars. But sometime after the 1970s, the machines got quieter.
In 1979, nearly 90,000 coal miners worked in Appalachia. By 2020, that number had plummeted to just 20,000. Automation, global competition, and the rise of natural gas pulled the plug on an industry that had powered not just homes, but entire towns. The timber industry followed suit. With strict environmental regulations and over-logging depleting resources, sawmills shut down, one after the other. Jobs vanished, and when they did, people followed. Young workers left in droves, heading for cities with opportunity. Those who stayed behind watched storefronts shutter, schools consolidate, and main streets turn to ghost towns. Unemployment soared, in some counties reaching double the national average. Families who once prided themselves on hard work found themselves on welfare programs they never thought they'd need. Dependency rose not out of laziness but out of a lack of options. Meanwhile, promises of economic revival were made but rarely kept. Delayed infrastructure projects, poor broadband access, and minimal outside investment meant the region was left behind as the rest of the country surged into the tech era. And with so much attention focused elsewhere, Appalachia became a map of missed opportunities. So, what happens to a region when the world moves on but the people are still standing there, waiting for a train that never comes? In Appalachia, resilience is real, but it's not a substitute for a paycheck. And without jobs, roads, or modern industry, many are left clinging not to prosperity, but to memory. In Appalachia, not every ghost tale begins with "once upon a time." Some of them start with a police report, a coroner's file, or a crumbling newspaper clipping. Take the Mothman sightings of 1966-67. It began near Point Pleasant, West Virginia, when two couples claimed to see a tall, winged creature with glowing red eyes, hovering near an abandoned TNT factory. More than 100 people would report similar encounters in the months that followed. Then, just over a year later, the Silver Bridge collapsed, killing 46 people. There was no proven connection, but the timing? Uncanny. The Mothman vanished just as the bridge fell. No definitive explanation ever emerged. No hoaxers came forward. Just the wreckage and a town forever changed. Further south, in Virginia, in 1893, a woman named Martha Lott was found dead near Wares Creek, her body bruised and mouth sealed with soil. Locals called her the Witch of Wares Creek, blaming her death on a cursed hex gone wrong. But coroner records showed signs of blunt force trauma, not magic. Still, the community whispered of witchcraft, and her name never made it to a proper tombstone. Dig into Appalachian folklore, and you'll find academic work from institutions like Berea College and UNC, revealing something profound. Folklore here isn't about fantasy, it's about fear and memory.
Oral traditions passed down not to entertain, but to warn, to preserve, to explain what science couldn't yet. So when does folklore stop being fiction and start becoming history? Appalachia never needed Hollywood to scare it. The mountains have always whispered their own warnings. And sometimes when you peel back the legend, what you find underneath is even more unsettling because it's real. For all the darkness Appalachia has endured, it's never been defined by tragedy alone. In 1965, the federal government finally took notice, launching the Appalachian Regional Commission, ARC. Its goal? Connect isolated communities to opportunity with roads, healthcare, and education. Over time, those investments paid off. Between 1960 and 2000, high school graduation rates rose by 15%, infant mortality dropped, and thousands of miles of highway were laid across hills once only reachable by mule. But the real backbone of revival didn't come from Washington. It came from the people. In McDowell County, West Virginia, where bookstores were once unheard of, volunteers built public libraries from donated sheds. In rural Tennessee, churches and non-profits brought in telehealth vans, offering therapy sessions and medical consults for folks who couldn't afford the gas money to reach a hospital. Former coal miners enrolled in retraining programs, learning new trades from coding to solar panel installation. And as the economy slowly shifts, culture is rising from the ashes. Bluegrass festivals are popping up again, not to sell tickets, but to reclaim pride. Young artisans are reviving traditional woodcarving, quilting, and pottery not as relics, but as living legacies. In towns like Hindman, Kentucky, music schools echo with banjos and fiddles once silenced by decline. So here's the question. Can a region rebuild without forgetting what broke it? Appalachians aren't looking for pity. They're building libraries, planting gardens, and tuning strings. They're honoring the past, not escaping it. Because survival here isn't just endurance, it's art, it's memory, it's defiance wrapped in melody. And that, maybe more than anything, is what makes Appalachia impossible to count out. The ghosts of Appalachia aren't just in the past, they echo in today's headlines. Mine collapses still happen. Coal dust still steals breath. Waterways still run dark, in places where regulation is thin and accountability is thinner. The Black Lung Benefits Act, created decades ago, still needs expansion to keep up with modern cases. And while bipartisan infrastructure bills promise new roads and broadband, many towns are still waiting for their first reliable clinic. But these aren't just Appalachian issues, they're American issues. They're about who gets protected and who gets left behind.
About whether the government listens to lobbyists or to the people choking on dust, and about what happens when we stop paying attention to the places that built the nation's backbone. So here's the real question. If we can't learn from the sacrifices buried in these hills, what does that say about the future we're building? Appalachia teaches us that resilience can't replace justice. That community can carry you far, but not all the way. Oversight matters, policy matters, memory matters. Because the moment we forget what happened in Buffalo Creek or to the Bell family or to Marie Rogers, we risk letting it happen again, somewhere else, to someone else. From deadly mine blasts to forgotten pandemics, every tragedy here is etched in court records, headlines, and aching memory, not myth. Appalachia's scars are real. So is its strength. Preserve these histories, push for just policies, and stand with communities still carrying the weight of truths buried too long. And that's all about it. What are your thoughts on Appalachia's hidden history? Have you or someone you know experienced its beauty or its burdens? And if you're drawn to eerie truths and forgotten places, don't miss our next deep dive into America's most haunted industrial ruins. If you liked this video, please give a thumbs up, and if you'd like more updates, subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click on the bell icon so you don't miss any videos and get notifications on time. Don't hesitate to give suggestions for our videos. See you in the next one. And if you're drawn to eerie truths and forgotten places, don't miss our next deep dive into America's most haunted industrial ruins.